So, what I want to start off with is just a brief description of what project management is, what project management tools are for those of you who may not know, and how they are helpful and useful for people. So, project management is really just a way to keep track of like a task from start to completion, right? And so, in the world of project management, there's a lot of words that sort of get thrown around. You have systems, you have workflows, you have processes, you have steps, and those kind of things. Those are all like words that people use to describe them. And so, generally, what I look at is I like the word workflow to describe a process that starts with something and it moves through a series of individual processes, and then those individual processes end up with your outcomes. So what a project management system does is it just allows you to build that workflow.
Welcome to PBP.FM, brought to you by Push Button Podcasts, your go-to resource for grabbing attention, building awareness, and creating authority in your marketplace. I'm Richard Matthews, your host and guide through the wonderful world of podcasting as a driver of business. Here, we teach how to use a multimedia podcast as the cornerstone of your omnipresent content marketing strategy. Whether you're an entrepreneur, podcaster, expert, or thought leader, you'll discover creative ways to leverage your digital content. From blogs to video, from YouTube to TikTok, and everything in between. I'll show you how to stand out from the noise so you can directly connect with potential customers, build strategic partnerships, and drive leads into your business. Get ready for actionable tips and tangible takeaways on improving your digital presence across the board. With that, let's dive into this week's episode of PBP.FM.
Hello and welcome back to PBP.FM. I'm Richard Matthews and I've got Kevin Rundle back on the line. Kevin, you there?
I am here, Richard, and we're
I know
on the other side of
we
the
took a
slight
few
break.
weeks off of recording, which I know if you guys are watching the show, you wouldn't have seen that because we just publish every week. But we took a few weeks off. We got to get back into the swing of things here after the holidays. And today we wanted to talk about, I believe, where we left off was getting into building an actual project management system to take care of keeping track of your post-production for your podcasts. Is that what you remember as well?
Yeah, that's where we're at. I mostly remember because I started trying everywhere in my life to silo each of the tasks. So I was only doing the task and lots of things that makes everything better.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I want to start off with is just a brief description of what project management is, what project management tools are for those of you who may not know, and how they are helpful and useful for people. And then we can dive into an actual example from ours so you can see how we silo our stuff for our team and how we manage it at a high level. I think you'll be surprised how simple it actually is. And then we'll talk a little bit about tools that you can use to do the same thing and build the same kind of checklists. And then what we'll do is with this episode, we'll include a copy of our checklists so you can build them into whatever project management system you would like. So that should make your life easier and it should be a fun discussion. So I guess to kick it off, high level, let's talk project management. So project management is really just a way to keep track of a task from start to completion, right? And so in the world of project management, there's a lot of words that sort of get thrown around. You have systems, you have workflows, you have processes, you have steps, and those kind of things. Those are all like words that people use to describe them. And so generally what I look at is I like the word workflow to describe a process that starts with something and it moves through a series of individual processes, and then those individual processes end up with your outcomes. So what a project management system does is it just allows you to build that workflow in with checklists. So your checklists just let you know, hey, this is what needs to happen. And if you're anything like we are, you're trying to grow your company using your podcast, then you want to think about your checklists in terms of roles. That's what the siloing does. And so even if you're the one doing all the work to start, you build the checklists out so that eventually you can say, hey, this set of checklists or this process here, I can hire off to a graphic designer, or I can hire off to a video editor, or I can hire off to a writer. And you can slowly start to step out of your processes. And a project management system allows you to both keep track of that and then be able to assign it out when you get to that point. Does that make sense?
It makes 100% sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Makes sense to me.
So the benefits that I see of using a project management system, one is it keeps you on track. So you can put in due dates, you can put in your checklist, and you can make sure that you're doing the same things over and over again. You can have that consistency. And I like to make sure that like all of my tasks in my whole business are on some sort of a process board. So I know what is assigned to me and what's assigned to other staff members. And so we can just see everything. So project management systems can really help grow with your company. And we could do a whole course just on using project management systems. So this is going to be just a brief overview of how we use it. And what I want to do is hop into a screen share with our project management system. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this screen share thing and hopefully it'll work. So we're going to share the entire screen here and you get to see the infinite loop of all of us.
Doesn't work. We have faith in you, Richard.
Have faith in us. Here we go. So let me know if you can see this test list here on
Woohoo!
project management system. Can you see that?
I see it. I see it.
Awesome.
I have to
So
look way down.
you have to look way down. Do I need to like zoom it in? Maybe I
Oh,
don't.
my setup is a little
Oh, yeah.
different now. So my computer is, and I used to have my computer at the same height as the camera, and I
Yeah.
moved it down because I'm like, I don't need to stare at the computer. I need to stare at the camera. Now you just went tricked me.
So project management systems come in lots of different flavors. This one here that we're looking at is ClickUp. ClickUp is an advanced project management system for designed for larger companies. But the processes that we're going to show in here, you could build into any project management system. You could build it into Trello, you could build it into Jira, you could build it into Asana, you could build it into Monday, you could build it into some of your self-hosted project management systems. You could even put it onto your own, on your iPhone. You could use the reminders thing and build your project management system in there just for yourself. It doesn't really matter. What matters
You're
is
building in Jira. Don't tell me.
yeah. What actually
Don't
matters
tell
is
me about Jira. Plus my trauma response. I'm
from working in the tech space there before. Jira is a big name.
working in the tech space. Jira. Hey, I don't like to see the Altasan login. Don't do it.
So there's a couple of things that I want to show you here. This is so in ClickUp we have essentially we track an item, whatever that item is. You want to track the item from start to completion. So that's just like a project management baseline. So I'm going to go over some baseline stuff for making use of a project management system. So whatever it is that you're going to track, in our case, we're talking about tracking the episode, right? So the episode of your show needs to be tracked from start to completion, right? And start to completion for your episode means that you get the raw files. You're going to take those raw files and get them all put into the right place. Then you're going to do your video editing. You're going to do your audio editing. You're going to do your written assets. You're going to do your graphic assets. You're going to do your scheduling and post production. And once it's all done, then everything is published, right? So what you've done is you've tracked that episode from start to completion. And that's what you're going to do with any project management system. And where people struggle is they don't pick out the thing that they're going to track through the movement. And so for podcasts, the thing that you want to track through your movement, track through the process is your episode. And so that's the piece that we're going to build off of is the episode. So you can see I've got a test episode 1 here. And if we were to come in and add a task, it would be test episode number 2, right? Test episode 2. And that would be the thing that we're going to track through. So the next sort of process there is to figure out what are the steps that you want to move your episode through. And that's where our siloing that comes in that we talked about last time. And so I have a set of subtasks, and these are our actual subtasks, the tasks that we use inside our company to manage this process. And I mentioned before, it's fairly simple, right? There's only five steps in here, and it's spread out across four different team members, or 5 different team members actually. So I'll go through all of those real quick and just show you what they look like. So the main episode task that's here at the top, that one is assigned to our project manager. This is Brooke. You see her name on here. I'm actually going to click off her because she doesn't need to be assigned to a test task. She'll look at it and be like, oh, why am I being assigned to test tasks? So our project manager manages the assignments and the due dates for the task, and it also manages the communication, in our case, with the customer. So if you're doing this yourself, you probably don't need to worry about assigning these things or making sure there's customer communication aspects, but I will show it to you. So you can see on our details, I did this in the test task. It's not on, this isn't a good example, but we'll generally have a checklist in here that'll have like email 1 to
How
customer.
granular are your checklists?
I'm going to show you all of those here in just a second. So this one doesn't have the customer communications on it because it's a test task, but the project manager will have a set of customer communications. It'll be like, hey, email 1, we're starting stuff. Email 2, we're going through things. And email 3, they're whatever those are on there. I can show you an actual live client here in a minute, so you can see like how the project manager's tasks look. But those are generally housed on, in this case, the parent task. You can see the subtasks that are below that. If you're using another project management system like Trello, it'll actually switch views to be like a board view where you would have actually, I think I can probably do that. If we go to a board view, looks like this, right? And the episode would be sitting on a card. It's like episode 1, and it'd be sitting in the first one, which is like needs to be done, right? Or to do. And then it would move into, the first
You got incoming.
filed prep tasks. And then it would move on to step number 2, which is, phase 1, prep and do full cut. And then it would create written assets. And each of these lists essentially would be your next item. So they'd just be vertical instead of horizontal, I guess, if that makes sense for Trello. That is the project management. And then when we get into the task, you have the subtasks, right? And so here's the subtasks: file prep, phase one, create written assets, thumbnail designs, and phase two, export and schedule files. So what I want to talk about real quickly is why it's in the order that it's in. And so we talked about this in the siloing episode, but we start with the file prep tasks because we
Yeah.
want to get all of the files in the right spot and do several things. So you asked how detailed the checklists are. This is what the actual checklist looks like for one of our clients. And so this is the file prep task. And this is done by, we have one person on our team who handles all the file prep tasks for all of our clients. And so the first step is they're going to download the files from the recording software. And then so we've got Squadcast, Riverside, Zencaster, and Zoom are the primary places where our clients record. And I don't have the links to these right now, but we actually have a how to download files for each one of these that they can click on and actually see like how to do that if they don't know how. All right, so that's the first step is to download the
Yeah.
files. And this last little tag here says using Mac Mini in the cloud. This is a super secret tech hack. We have a server that we purchased that it lives in a, what would you call it? It's a co-located server farm in Chicago, and it's got a T1 like direct
Just a virtual
connection to
private
that.
server.
It's a whole box. It's
Yeah.
ours. We own the whole computer, and we just pay for the connection to the internet.
Oh, you actually, yeah. So you have an actual
Yeah.
cloud server that you have bare metal.
Yeah, so we have bare metal. We own the machine. If we stop paying them, they send us the machine back, that kind of thing. So it's actually our machine. It's connected to the direct backbone of the internet. What's useful about that for us is these files can sometimes be really big, right? Like this Squadcast interview that you and I are recording will probably end up being about 6 GB. So like 3 GB for your side and 3 GB for my side. That's a lot of data to transfer back and forth, especially depending on your team members. They might be in other countries or have weaker internet connections, or we travel all the time. So sometimes our internet's great, sometimes it's not. And so what the Mac Mini in the cloud does is we can connect to it. And when we go to Squadcast and click download the files, it downloads a 6 GB file in 2 to 3 seconds. And so that gives us, my team, a way to move their files very quickly. And so they can move through all of our clients' files and not, click the download and wait for half an hour while it downloads and then have to upload it into a few different places and wait 2 or 3 hours for that. It would be unsustainable for us to do that at scale. So we have a server
That's also the server that you do the version on.
that we do what on?
That you I can't think of the word. You compress it.
Oh, yeah.
You
So
change codec, move
So
it around.
we're doing the codec changing. That would actually, it was on our checklist here. It was, you would,
Transcode. That's the word I was looking.
and we're actually not doing that anymore because we've decided we have enough space and we're paying for enough things. We're actually not shrinking the files. But if you want to shrink the files, you can use Handbrake or something to transcode the files as well. And that would be the first step, is to transcode them to be smaller. And so, we just use one of Handbrake's built-in like presets. It's like set it to Apple TV or whatever, which is generally good enough for what we're looking for. And it'll cut the files
Yeah.
in half or something without losing the quality. And so we would have transcode the files if we're going to do that. And if you are on one of the smaller plans with, say, Descript or Google Drive, that might be a requirement for you because you want to, have less hard drive space being dedicated towards just the raw files. So transcoding might be a good option to have right in there. And we were doing that with our staff, but we've recently stopped doing that because we're paying so much money to Google Drive and Descript that we have obscene amounts of hard drive space with them. So our next step is to create the Google Drive folder, and we just do a backup of everything. So we create a raw files folder, we upload all the files, and then we update the Google Drive folder link in the parent task. And so what I want to do real quick is just show you what that looks like. So we'll come over here and we'll open up Google Drive, and I'll just show you what some live client stuff looks like when we get in here. Is we use shared drives, and so here we go, shared drives. And if we pick out any particular client here and open up their shared drive and we go to the new episodes folder, here's, episode 0. This one hasn't been recorded yet, but we come in here, we create a new folder, and we just put raw footage, right? Raw files, something like that. And we just upload and keep a backup of all of the raw footage on our Google Drive. So we have originals if we ever need them. And that's what this is we have, we keep backups of everything. That's for ourselves, for our clients. If you ever want the raw footage in the future, for other things, there's lots of good ways that you can use those assets in the future. So it's a good idea to keep them and not delete them. A lot of people will do that. They'll delete the original files, and then they'll regret that later. So we always recommend keeping a backup of your raw files. And if you're going to do that, definitely transcode them first. If you're worried about the space, so that transcode step on Handbrake is useful. And then the last step there is we keep track of the Google Drive folder link, right? So this is the episode 0 or whatever. We'll take this folder, the link for that folder, and we keep track of it on the parent task. So here's the parent task, and you'll see like you have your custom fields. You can have custom fields on any of your project management systems. we keep track of that on here. And what that does is, as the tasks move forward, whoever's assigned to this, right, when we get to the file prep tasks and the thumbnail design tasks, if someone needs to find this Google Drive folder to get any of the files or upload any of their things, it's right here in the task at this point. So they can just copy the URL or they can just click on it to open it instead of having to log into Google Drive, locate the hard drive that the client's folder is in, find the particular episode that they're in, and then go to the folders that they need. It's just a direct link and it speeds everything up. And so all of these little things, they've been thought about because we do this regularly, if that makes sense. So that's the first one, is to get the Google Drive folder link. And then the next one is to create our project file in Descript, which is our video editing software. And so the video editing software could be any number of software pieces. Like you could use Adobe Premiere Pro, or you could use Final Cut Pro, or you could use Descript like we use. Whatever your video editing thing is, the next step is to basically create the project files. We use Descript because it's collaborative and we have a set of team members that are working together on the same project doing different things. So if you're doing this all yourself, you don't need to use something like Descript, but Descript is really useful. So our set there is we add the files to it. We're going to create the sequences. What a sequence is in Descript is just it's taking in this case we'll have 3 video files. We'll have the video file of me, we'll have the video file of you, and then we'll have the video file of our screen share. And what a sequence does is it puts all 3 of those together and lines them up, right? So like when you talk, you're talking at the right time and whatnot. So they're stacked, if that makes sense, instead of being like in a line. So it turns them into an actual video file. And that's our first step. And we have our file prep person do all of this. So when the video editor gets to it, it's just ready for them. And they don't have to do any of the management process. They can just do video editing, if that makes sense. And we have them submit for the transcription. Yeah. Descript does the transcription for it. And then we take the project link from Descript, and we're going to do the same thing where we put it into our details. There's our Descript project link as a link here. So when it moves on to the next person, the file prep task is done. And the assignment over here is for our video editor. All of the things that they need are already there. They've got a link directly to the project. They've got a link directly to the Google Drive, and they don't need any other pieces on there. So that is the file prep task there, is to get the Descript files. And then the last couple of things here that we have on our checklist is we delete the recording from the recording software. So if they're in Squadcast, Riverside, or Zencaster, we remove it from the software, because now at this point we have backups in Google Drive and we have the project files in our video editing software. So we don't need to have them taking up space essentially in the recording software. A lot of the recording softwares will have limits to how much you can store, or how much the clients can store. And so we'll remove those out of the recording software so it's not taking up their space. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
And then our last step, and this is always useful if you have more than one person on your checklists, on your set of tasks, your workflow, is to notify the next person, right? So in this case, we always notify the show manager on the parent task that this episode's file prep is completed and ready to be assigned to the rest of the team, right? And so the reason why this one doesn't just notify the next person is because the file prep task is our, what would you call it? It is the task that kicks everything off. And so the rest of the team hasn't generally been assigned yet and hasn't been given due dates. So the show manager comes in and they assign the pieces and they assign due dates for when this show is supposed to be done. So they'll go through and be like, hey, this episode needs to be done in 2 weeks. So we have to have this done by this day, this done by this day, this done by this day, and this done by that day, right? So we assign the due dates and the tasks, and the show manager does that. So whoever the next person on your team is, even if it's you always want to have a step in the process that is to notify that person and let them know. So there's communication happening, and the communication is actually part of the checklist to complete. So that's the first step, is the file prep tasks done by one person. And it's just, in this case, it's just moving the files around and making sure they're all in the right place. And we have backups of everything and we got links all in the right spot. Make sense so far?
Makes total sense.
Yeah. So
this is a tangent. That's funny, but you call them a show manager. And in TV, they would call them a showrunner. And in video games, they call them a game director.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny that you use different vernacular for somebody who does the exact same task, essentially.
That's fun. Maybe we should use the video game one. That'd be more fun. Call them a showrunner.
A show director?
Show director. Yeah, your show director. That'd be fun.
Yeah, so they use the director title in video games because the length of development is so long. So I've been reading a bunch about this for stupid personal reasons. But so the composer that tends to add thoughts talks about it from the perspective of both video games and movie and television. And they talk about how basically the showrunner is like, you think of the director because they have their name and face associated with a movie or a TV sometimes. But the showrunner is really the person who like grinds the gears and makes sure all of the dates are missed and the budgets are followed. And
Yep, that's what our show manager does. So same kind of thing with that. So I guess what I wanted to cover real quick was the task sets. So right, so we're looking at these. We talked about this being
Yeah.
siloed. So this file prep is done by one person, and that is someone who has a VA skill set, right, where they can click on the buttons and download the things and move stuff from here to there. So you're looking for someone who's detail oriented. You're looking for
Yeah, and the checklist was pretty granular.
yeah,
Download the
pretty granular.
videos. Do
Download
this,
the
do that.
videos, do this, do that, do the next thing, move them on. And as long as you have someone who can do that, it's not it this isn't a time intensive task unless you have terrible internet and you have to download files, whatnot. So that's where the Mac Mini comes in and helps that out, makes it a faster task for them. And so that's what you're looking for there. And then you'll see this one where it says phase one and phase two. The reason it says phase one and phase two is because these are done by the same person. These are our video editor, right? Or a post-production person. And these are split into two different phases because we need to do a first set, and then we're going to create some of the assets that this first set is like dependent on, and then they can go back and finish their job. And so what we're looking at here is our video editing checklists are our next ones. And so the order for that, the reason why we do this prep and do the full video cut is the full video cut is what our written assets team is going to need in order to come through and do all of the written assets for it, because they'll have it. We have found it is easier to have the full cut video done first rather than trying to do the written assets from the raw transcript from the raw video, because there might be like edits and cuts that are moved out or sections that are removed from the thing, or what some things happen where having the full cut video done first allows the written assets team to be a lot cleaner and faster. So that's why we do it in
Yeah, make it much more concise. Makes sense to me.
yeah, it's more concise. So like it'll have the tip and tail done, it'll have all the ums and ahs removed, it'll have a lot of things done already that when the written asset team comes to look at it, they're looking at a cleaner finished product to do the written assets from. So the prep and do full video cut, that's this task here. And let me pop in to our it says prep and do full video cut. And of course, I don't have all the action items in there. Let me see if I can if I can pull that out. But I'll have to add it to the checklist. I'm not sure why our checklist didn't show up. But the checklist on here is fairly simple. So I'll just go ahead and just add it in here while we're talking. So the checklist on the prep and do full video cut is we do something that's called a tip and tail, right? So tip and tail the video. And tip and tail the video means, whenever you get on a recording and you start recording, you generally have the couple of seconds where you're like, hey, are we live? Can you hear each other? Yes, no, that kind of thing. And at the end of the thing, you hit the stop record. And now you have some dead space generally at the beginning of the video, and you have some dead space at the end of the video. And we cut those off, right? So that's called tip and tailing your video. And the next step for the video editor is going to be adding the scenes. And what adding scenes means is they're going to go through, and there are places in the video, especially if it's a interview video like you and I are doing right now, and especially so if there's one with screen share like this, where we're going to say a scene is one person speaking, or it's the other person speaking, or it's the screen share, or it's some combination thereof, where both people are on the screen, or maybe both people in the screen share are on screen. And they just go through and they decide where they're going to put those scenes in, right? And so at the beginning, when you and I were talking back and forth, we might have one scene where you and I are talking, we're both on the screen, right? Because we're having a conversation. And then the next scene might have been earlier in the video where I started talking and you started listening, where my face might be big and your face might go down to the bottom and be smaller, right? Does that make sense? So that might be a second scene. And then we switched into the screen share, where like the screen might be the big thing, and then you and I might be small in the lower left, and that might be a third scene. And so they're going to go through the video and they're going to add the scenes, right? And they're not going to do any video editing to them. They're just going to mark where the scenes should be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And then the last step is they're going to apply the scene templates. So apply the scene templates. I say that's the last step. It's not really the last step. I can spell too, right? It's always fun to see me type live. So apply the scene templates. And so the scenes have all been added. Yeah, I can spell all sorts of things, generally wrong if I'm doing it live on video. That's how it goes. So we go through and we apply the scene templates, and the scene templates
As long as
are,
you follow the rules of the English language, it should be clear how it's spelled, right?
if only that's the way it worked. I got the several children that are learning English at the moment, at different stages.
So all my kids are in French immersion here,
Oh yeah.
and so everything is literally spelled the way it sounds in French.
I
Like
mean,
if it
that's
says
awfully nice.
you know it's right. Like we, if it's got that w sound, it's going to start with ou.
Yeah.
If it's
Every time.
but then we've been teaching them. So oiseau is a bird, ou, right? But then in English, you're like, Well, let's go through this, even though you don't want to.
You can't spell any of those
Write
words.
that down and read it.
Yep, yep, that is true. So the scene templates are
And
a
so, like, English is one
sorry,
was
I cut into you there, but the scene templates are essentially the video edits, right? So, the scene where we're saying, "Hey, we want to have, me big and you small," or we want to have the screen share big and both of us small. Descript allows us to have those scenes predefined, and our video editors, like, we'll pay a high-end video editor to develop those templates for us. So this video editor can just come in and say, like, "Here's all of our scenes," and then apply this template to the scenes. And so their video editing, the actual, like, style is pretty quick and simple. And then it'll go through and they'll just be like, adjust the templates, right? So the templates are not always fantastic, meaning, like, sometimes you'll say, "Hey, like, apply this template," and then it'll put the wrong name on there. So they'll adjust the templates and make sure that, like, hey, Kevin's name is spelled right and Richard's name is spelled right and the captions are pulling up right. So all the templates will be a part of that. So they'll adjust the templates, and then they're going to go through and do the last couple of things, which is, run the AI audio enhancements. So Descript has some AI audio enhancements. See, look, there we go. I can't spell enhancements either. So they'll run the AI audio enhancements. It's called, in Descript, it's called Studio Sound. If you're using Final Cut Pro, it's just called Audio Auto, and you click the Auto button, and it runs the AI audio enhancements in Final Cut Pro. So depending on which video editing software, there'll generally be some sort of audio enhancements that you can run. If you want to do it all manually, you can look this kind of stuff up. It's called leveling and compression, and there's something else. I can't remember what they're all called, denoising. And so we run a lot of those audio enhancements to make the audio sound good. And at that point, you have essentially done all of the things, right? So you've got the tip and tail, you've got all the scenes selected and adjusted. So that's all the video stuff. And then you've got the audio done. And now this person's job is completed. They've got a full cut video ready to go. And now they can step back. And the last one there is going to be, notify the written assets person, right? On the thing that the episode is
so
ready
at this point, the video's been watched twice.
for. At this point, the only person who's watched the video would be the video editor as they go through it.
Just the video. Oh, okay. So the guy who makes scenes doesn't actually watch it.
So yeah, I mean, this person here that's doing the scenes, they'll probably go through and watch portions of it, and they're looking for, like, hey, when did the scenes change, and when does it make sense to put things where? They may or may not watch the whole video unless they want to watch everything. And so our subtask, the create written assets, that's our next step. And this is where they're going to come through. And look, I actually had the checklist on this one for you. The create written assets person, this is our writer. And so our writer is going to do a couple of things. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to edit the transcripts, and they're going to make sure that the transcript that goes along with the video is clean, right? And so the AI will do most of the transcript work, 80 to 90% of it. And so they're actually going to watch the video, generally at 1.5 or 2x speed, and they're going to go through and just make sure that, the punctuation is right and that any of the words that the AI just misunderstood are corrected. So we have a good clean transcript. The transcript's going to be used in a number of different ways. It might be used in the short clips as, like, actual captions that show up on top of the video. The SRT files, that is a caption file that they use for hard of hearing stuff. We need to have that SRT file so we can upload it to YouTube, and we can upload it with the podcast on the podcast networks. And in the United States, at least, if you are a business, you have to make accommodations for hard of hearing. It is part of, oh man, I'm going to get this wrong.
Accessibility.
Yeah, it's part of the accessibility rules. And so it's actually a
Yeah,
requirement.
the Americans with Disabilities Act,
Yeah, the ADA.
whatever that is exactly.
And so it's actually a
ADA.
requirement to have the SRT files. So we make sure we provide those for all of those. If you're not selling any services to the marketplace, it's not a requirement, but most of our clients are. So since these are marketing materials, generally speaking, we have to have the transcripts, and that's part of the process. So that's the first step, is they go through and they edit the transcripts. And because they're listening to the whole episode to do that, the next sort of part of that is, as they're listening, they're looking for clips that would make good social media posts that they can pull out of the episode. So as they're listening, the process essentially is they choose those 6 short clips and they just highlight them in the transcript, right? So they highlight the piece and be like, oh, that's a good one. And they pull those out. And then they're going to edit
Do you use any AI software to do that at all yet? Or have you tried?
to pick the short clips.
Yeah.
We've tried a number of them. The problem with all of the AI versions of picking the transcript clips is they don't tend to have the contextual understanding of the whole episode, or, like, cultural understanding or other things. And, like, they're not great. So we use a human being to select.
I know. I asked because I've tried a couple now, and I normally, if they make you 10 clips, 2 of them are usable.
We'll get 6 human chosen clips because they understand the context, they understand the culture, they understand, the context of how this episode fits into the larger scheme of things. Because like, our writer will be assigned to one show, so they'll have watched every episode and they understand who they're listening to and what they're talking about, right? And so we get a much better quality when we have a human being select them. And then what they're gonna do is in those
Right.
actual individual clips, is they're going to edit the transcript in detail, which we're not gonna do for the whole episode because it doesn't make sense to do that. But you'll hear, like, while we're talking, I said things like, and sometimes you repeat something where it's like I or something like that, where you
Yeah.
are trying to talk and in an audio conversation that makes perfect sense, right? And it's the way that we communicate and it's fine. But on the short clips, when you only have 30 seconds or you only have 45 seconds to get a point across, we'll go through and we'll edit those sections in detail where they will come in and they will cut out any duplicate words, they'll cut out any unnecessary words, or if an idea was like spread across a couple of sentences, we might actually remove a couple of sentences in the middle so the idea is concise in the video in that short clip, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. And so we have our writer do that as part of their process so that the short clips that come out of it are high quality, good clips. And that's basically all they do is they just do the selection and the transcript fixing on that. And they don't do any of the video editing because that's where the phase two comes in. And it's just that's part of the language work that the written asset person is doing. Does that make sense? And so they're going
Yeah,
to move
makes perfect sense.
and then they're going to do the show notes. And so I know this is not a very detailed part of the checklist, but we have every show has a template for their show notes. And so the template has several aspects of the show. It'll have like what's the show description, the episode title. It'll have like what the show was talked about, what items were talked about on the show, any resources that were mentioned. And it's like a whole template for the show. And our writers know basically to fill out that show notes template. And so the show notes are generally done where we take the transcript and we pass the whole transcript into a AI tool. We use ChatGPT or Magi or Claude. We use several of them depending on, what we're feeling for the day or who's currently got the most advanced model, which changes every 2 or 3 weeks. So whatever I told you now would be wrong in a few weeks. So whichever model is currently like doing the best work, we will pass the whole transcript into them and we will give them our whole show notes template. And if you do that well and you prompt them well, you can actually have the, 80 to 85% of the show notes templates written from the transcript, and then the writer takes all of those and cleans it all up and finishes it so the finished show notes actually look really good. And so that's the show notes portion. So they'll write the show notes and then they're going to write episode titles and they're going to write short clip titles for all the short clips they selected up here. And they're going to write any of the captions. And so the caption is probably not the clearest word we could use there, but these are social media post text that are going to go with each of the short clips. And
Yeah,
so they'll
that
have,
makes sense. It wasn't what I was thinking when you used the word caption, but now that you've said it, that makes perfect sense because it's the
yeah,
caption that goes with the image or the
it's the
video.
caption that goes with the video, right? And so
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
that we have our writers do those is we take the actual transcript, the one that they edited up here, that nice detailed caption, and we give that to the AI and we say, hey, rewrite this as a social media post that describes this video. And so they'll use that and then they'll clean
Yeah,
it.
that's pretty good. I have some good prompting to take a single caption, a single social media text post, and change it contextually for 6 different platforms.
Yeah. So that's
Because at
essentially what
one
we
point, I was like, when I post on Facebook, I want it to be personal. When I post it on LinkedIn, I want it to be more professional. So, like, how many emojis are you allowed to use? How many?
yeah.
Should there be a link or no link?
And so that's what we're doing
ChatGPT really uses that well.
is we have them write all of those, and those all go into the same document. So the show notes will be in the document. The episode title will be in the document. Each of the short clips with their titles will be in that one document, and all of the short clip captions. So it'll be like clip number one. Here's the transcript of it, and here's the caption for it, and all that'll be in one single document. And they've written all of their writing stuff is all in one document. So the transcripts, the show notes, the titles, everything is all in a single Google Drive document. Generally in Google Drive, right next to the raw footage, it'll say written assets, and it'll have a document in there with all of the things. And so they're going to finish all that up. And then when they're done, again, notify the video editor and the thumbnail designer on the parent task comments that they're done, that it can move on to the next steps. And so that's the written assets. And now the written assets, the thumbnail designer can come through and make the thumbnails. And so the thumbnails, I don't actually have any checklists for the thumbnails because, well, I don't know how to write a checklist for a designer at this point, but they basically have two tasks, and it is YouTube thumbnail. Oh, I didn't do the checklist part. Checklist. So YouTube thumbnail, and we have a podcast thumbnail. And what they are doing there is they're just making the YouTube thumbnails the 1080 by the 1080p like
Yeah,
rectangular
the
thumbnail.
right size.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then they do the same one in square for the podcast networks, because Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Amazon, they all use the square image for that episode. And so generally it's gonna have the host and the guest and the headline that the writer came up with for it and, like, the episode number, that kinda stuff that just make for a good podcast headline or a good podcast image. And so we do those for both YouTube and the podcasting, and the graphic designer does all of that, and they need to have the written assets done in order to do that because that's where they're gonna get the headline from and anything else. So that's the thumbnail design task. It's fairly quick and simple, which is why if you notice on this list here, it was notify the video editor and the thumbnail designer because they can both start working at the same time because this person doesn't need the thumbnail designs done before they can do the video edits. And that's where we get to phase two. Phase two of the video editor's work is now that all the written assets are done, they're going to come through and finish off their tasks. And their tasks to finish everything off are going to come through and be to export all of the files. So export all files, and the files are going to be the final video and the final audio and the 6 short clips and the SRT files, right? And they're going to export all of those from the video editing software. And so they're going to export as high quality video as we can. We're going to export a high quality, generally an MP3 file for the podcast networks. And then all of the short clips that were edited and whatnot, we'll apply the templates to those and export them. And then we'll export the SRT files. And then all of that gets uploaded back over to the Google Drive folder for backup. And so instead of the raw footage file, there'll be a written assets folder. And that's where any of the written stuff will be for the team. And there'll be a final audio and video files folder. And there's also going to be one we call it derivative content. And the derivative content, it's a financial term, but derivative just means, a smaller piece of a larger thing, essentially, or something was created from something else. So all the short clips live in there. And so this is what, like, all of the episodes will look like when they're done is they'll have the written assets, the raw footage, the final audio video, the derivative content, and then generally they'll have the graphic assets, which would be the YouTube thumbnail.
You talk what you're spelling, or I spelled derivative wrong earlier, and now I know because I see yours, which is
Yeah, no, you know.
sad.
I actually spelled it right. I could type something proper today on the video. But this is what, like, the Google Drive folder will look like when we're done, and then every single episode will look exactly the same and have the same folder structure. So no matter
Yeah.
which client we're looking at or which episode we're looking at, they'll always have these files with these things on them. It's all the backups of everything that we need, which makes it really easy for in the future. I want to go back through and say, like, hey, go back through all of our last 15 episodes and find all of the transcripts, for instance. All the transcripts will be in the written assets folder, and pull out all of, XYZ or whatever. We want to turn those into a book, right? It's really easy to find everything if you keep track of your files and folders like this. And so,
Yeah, we want more shorts. They know the raw footage is there.
yeah, the raw footage is there. They know everything is there. All the project files are in there. And so that's part of the project management system, is also making sure that you're doing a good job of managing your file folder structure. And so you get to sort of see what ours looks like. So they're going to export all the files. And then the last thing that they're going to do is they're going to schedule everything on social media. And I would.
So your short clip, this is a question I've thought about several times talking to you, Richard. The suggestion is this is one of those things where it's like part of why post-production sucks so bad, is to actually format them slightly different for each of the platforms. So, like, when you do TikTok, the text is in this format on the bottom of it. And when you do YouTube, the text for a vertical video might not exist or might be less and in this format. When you do you guys do different versions for different platforms, or
So when we're doing the short clip,
six, and that's
so we will sometimes, we were doing this in the past and we don't always do it anymore, but we would, like, have the short clips and we would make portrait versions of them and we'd make square versions of them and we'd make the wide versions of them. And what we sort of learned is that the short clips do best on all of the vertical video platforms. So YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and Facebook Reels, Instagram Reels, those are all the big ones. And then the other two platforms, Twitter and LinkedIn, both do fine with the vertical videos. So they're not designed specifically for vertical videos, but if you upload the vertical videos, they still distribute well and people watch them and that kind of stuff. So we actually use the vertical videos. So the asset, the video that you're attaching to it, is the same. And then the only thing that changes is the caption that goes along with it. So, like, it'll, you have more space to write on LinkedIn than you do on Twitter, for instance. And so we'll have, when they're doing the written assets, they'll have different versions of them, and that's all in that written assets folder. So when they get to scheduling, we use
but you don't have a separate video file for each platform.
No, we don't. We use the same video file. It makes life easy for us and it makes life easy for our clients. And so we're not creating as much of separate things. If you go back about a year ago, you'll see that like each one of our clients would have like, instead of 6 shorts, there'd be 18 and it would be six shorts in 3 different formats. But we've gone down to using just
Yeah.
the
So the reason I asked that question, so the guy who talked about it the most was Alex Ramosi. Talks about doing a different one for YouTube Shorts than he does for TikTok. Even if it's technically the same piece of video, they formatted it a little bit different. They have a different template or whatever.
Yeah, so you can
And
do that.
then
And
the one that I watch pretty frequently that does business stuff and talks about that. And he also recommends you don't use the same exact video for TikTok that you use for YouTube Short.
yeah, you
And
can
so I was just
do different
curious if
ones.
you guys did that or not.
You can do different ones if you want. We don't. And
Like I don't see a reason. Like for me, TikTok and YouTube Short feel the same, except TikTok's longer.
yeah, you have more space on TikTok than you do on YouTube Shorts. So we generally build for the smallest platform, like the smallest lengthwise, and that's YouTube Shorts, which is I think 60 seconds. I know you can do like 3 minutes on TikTok.
60 seconds.
And so like some of the things that we'll do, the only thing that like changes is like when we upload to TikTok, you can have TikTok put captions over the top of it. If you use their built-in captions versus putting them on the video file, they'll give you better distribution. Or like we'll make sure that when we upload to TikTok, we'll like use a trending sound and turn the volume down because you'll get some extra bump from the trending sound and things like that. But those are all things that you can manage in your social media scheduling software. And so what our team will do is they'll schedule, it's like this is episode 1, and they'll take, the final video gets scheduled as a premiere on YouTube, and the final audio gets scheduled onto Captivate or Podbean or whatever the podcast network is, and for that time. And then all the short clips will be scheduled in the social media software for the next several days on the clips. And that's it. Once all this is done, then the episode is done. We can move on to the next one. And because we use scheduling and we schedule all this stuff, you can actually get ahead a few weeks, or as far as you have content recorded. And that's the whole process. And that's all the checklist things that we work on.
Yeah, nice. Like I think you can tell your process is pretty tight. You've
Yeah.
obviously played with it over time and
Yeah. So
tried a few things and
we've gotten through it.
Are you ready to amplify your influence and stand out from the noise? Join Richard Matthews on pbp.fm as he explores the power of podcasting, social media, and strategic content to boost your reach. You'll discover the latest trends in video, audio, and influencer marketing, plus unlock insider tips to create binge-worthy content spotlighting you as a leader. With upbeat energy and clear, empowering advice, Richard guides publishers, experts, and entrepreneurs on starting a podcast, improving social strategy, and connecting with your perfect audience. Visit pbp.fm and book a podcast strategy session to start spreading your message today.
I'll show you a couple of other things while I've got this open that are useful to make your life simpler, right? So like one of the things we can do is you can set up task templates, and task templates are really useful for anything that any of your project management systems will have. They'll have the ability to template things. They don't always call them task templates. They have different names for them depending on the platform that you're using. ClickUp uses task templates. And so like here's test episode 2. When we click on it, I'm going to go to templates and browse templates. Here's all of our post-production templates. And you can see for each of our clients, we have a post-production template. And so depending on, sometimes the show might be slightly different. So they'll have different checklists with them. But if I click on one of these and click use template, it'll apply that template and apply all of the things. You can see the tasks just sort of populated. And now this one has all those subtasks are on there. So file prep, data management, written assets, thumbnail design is all added on there. So that's like one thing you can do is you can have task templates. And then the other thing that you can do is sometimes you can, depending on the platform, and one of the reasons we like ClickUp in particular is because they allow us to automate that, which makes our life even simpler. And so what you can do is you can add an automation that says, hey, when a task is created, and let me see if there's a task is created on here, task or subtask created. And then you can select like, hey, what created it? And we'll say, what do I want? Templates, duplicated tasks. Let's just select all for now. So, but anyways, you can say like when you want the task created, and then what you want to do is you want to apply a template, and you can select the template. And so like, here's that template. We want to use this one. And so we click create on that. And now that automation is on, and now we've got the automation. What happens is when I put in test episode 003, instead of having to click on the thing and add the things, it'll take a couple of seconds, but you'll notice it'll start populating the the task template on there. And so all of the checklists and everything got added to your task and it's ready to go. And so like you'll see them as like populating live while we were looking at it. It was adding on the checklists. And so
Yeah.
those are some things that make your life easier is when you can add automations into that and keep track of like, hey, every time I have a new episode, these are the things that I want to have added to it. And you can even add your task assignments on here. So you can add your like who's assigned to what on your templates, which is useful. Can't generally do the due dates. You might be able to do like a cascading due date depending on the platform. Where it's like, hey, if the task was added on this day, we have 7 days and we want this done in 2 days and this done in 3 and this done in 4 and this done in 5. So by 7 days, it'll be done. We found that doesn't generally work too well for us.
Yeah, I presume it must exist there because it exists in Trello,
Yeah.
and ClickUp tends to have better features than Trello from my experience.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with Trello, but like
So there's
I found the ClickUp was more refined.
yeah, it's just there's a lot more things there. This can be overkill if you're not using as much as we are. There's only a couple other things I want to mention. Generally speaking, when you're using a project management system, you want to have an assignee and a due date on every task. So if there's not an assignee and there's not a due date, things like your home screen, which is like where you'll see like what's coming up and so like your tasks that are assigned to you, like if they don't have assignees and due dates, they won't show up in those places. So that's one of the first things that you want to make sure you're doing is anytime you add stuff to your project management system, make sure there's an assignee and a due date on every task because that'll make your system work better for you and it'll make work better for your team if you have your team members. And then the other one that is really useful to note, which this is not doing a good example of, is it's really useful to use verbs in the description of your task. So like this says file prep tasks, but it should probably say, prep all the files for the episode, right? So it's actually in a verb form, tends to work better than just saying, I don't know what you'd call it. These are passive. So if you can put your task words in active like verb form, it actually tends to
Active voice, yeah.
active voice, it works better. So like if we come in here and take a look at my onboarding template, we've gone through and done a lot of that work already. So like you'll see this one, they're all verbs, right? So manage the client setup, engineer the show assets, deploy the publishing locations, right? And so we go through and if you look at each of these, it's like assign due dates on all tasks, set up, click up, post-production, set up, post-production. And so like that's all the verbs, set up, assign, and then engineer show assets. It's like, create the show written assets, create the voiceover, create the graphic assets, create the video assets. So this is all verb driven. So if you, we're still in the process of refining that post-production template one, but if you can, it works better if you have active voice, verb driven task setups. And so that'll make your post-production templates work a lot better if you're using verb-driven stuff. You have assignees on everything, you have due dates. And when you can, tie in the automations to make your life simpler. So I know that's like, drinking from the fire hose for project management stuff for the day, but that's how we manage it at scale, right? So that's how we manage, we're doing 300 plus pieces of post-production every single week. So, that means we're doing almost 1,000 pieces of content a week. And that's the process. You just looked at it. Those are the exact templates that we use to manage that kind of process. And those are our basic rules is when we can, we always have verb driven, always have task, due dates, always have assignees. And then you have nice checklists that you've thought about the order that you want them to get done in so that they're not blocking whoever the next person is or whatever the next step is. And that's like a really high end version of how you do all of that. What we'll do here in this video is I'll include those checklists. So I'll make sure that the phase 1 and 2, their checklists aren't missing because I had to write those as we were going on my test board. It didn't have the right automation to pull them in. But the other thing that's really useful about that is if you can, on your checklists, you can put links to your process documentation. And so links to your process documentation in your checklists is useful for 2 things. So one of them is you can hire a new person. And if you hire a new person, when they get their checklist, you can assign the task to them and it'll have the checklist on there. And then with the checklist, there's a link to the process document. So the actual assignment of the task can train a new.
That's why I asked you how granular it was.
Yeah. And so I didn't have
depending on how granular it is, it can be used as training material also almost.
Yeah. So there's a reason why the way I like to think about it is if you're developing your process management, your project management stuff, is you want to have the checklist that shows up in the project management system is like your pre-flight checklist for a pilot, right? These are the things that these are the essentials. If you don't check these things, you might die. Right? So it's like, you have to have your 6 clips done. You have to have your transcripts done. But you notice the checklist doesn't describe how to do the transcription, right? It doesn't describe how to select the clips. It just says, make sure you get the 6 clips, right? And that's like, so the reason that's useful is not all of your people are going to be new all the time, right? And So you'll have a lot of senior people who have been working on this stuff for a long time, and all they need is the gut check of like, yep, did that, yep, did that, yep, did the next thing. So they can just check off, I did all the things. But if you have a new person, they have each of those items and they have the training for it. And they're like, okay, I need to do the Descript transcription process, and they can click the document link that's there, which we have those on most of our like actual client checklists. We have the documentation assigned with the checklist. I didn't have that on the test list that I was showing you guys, but the documentation will be there, and then they can click on the document and they can read through and watch the video on how to do it. And so I might have one that I can show you, but essentially we just put a checklist next to the checklist, like, hey, here's the SOP that goes along with this checklist. And so if you have that, now you have both.
Yeah, and that makes
senior people can click on it if they need refreshers or stuff like that. And your new people, you can actually use the task assignment as a way to train them. So they're getting trained like live in the application of your tasks. So that's project management from a high level.
I guess I owe you a beer. You managed to do it in less than 60 minutes, even with me going off on tangent.
Yeah. So that's all there is to that. I know it was a lot of just samples and stuff like that. What we'll do is we'll put our checklist in the resources below this episode, so you can have them, probably put them as like a PDF, and then you can build those into whatever project management system you want to use. Our recommendations, as you're just getting started, use Trello. Trello's cheap. And I think it's free actually to start, and you can build one workflow that just follows those things.
It's free to start, actually.
Yeah, free to start. And then,
I think you're allowed something like 5 boards or something, or you used to be.
Yeah.
And what you're really missing is like straight up automations. But until you're working with several people, the automations don't matter quite as much.
Yeah. So
because you're going to still use the templates.
You can still just apply them, and that's where it's like you can create the template and just apply the template manually each time. So Trello is a great place to start.
Right? Yeah, you can still create the template, and you just can't make it happen magically.
Yeah. So that's what
we ended up starting to pay because we built front end systems for creating all our cards, where there was actually a form that people filled out on a web page, and it produced the card.
Nice.
It assigned all the due dates.
Yeah. So what we'll do from here is we'll move on. Now we've got, you've got this whole beginning of the process is, now you've got your mini studio in place, and you've got a content library in place, and you've got, how to outline content, and now you know how to do the post-production of the content. We'll come back next week and we'll start talking about how you actually distribute these things and what you do with them and why, and how we look at and think about what to do with the content from there. And yeah, so I guess that's it for today. If you have any questions or anything, make sure you put them in the comments, and we will make new episodes to cover those things as we're going. And again, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me, Kevin.
You're very welcome, Richard.
Thanks for joining us this week on pbp.fm. Make sure to visit our website, pbp.fm, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or via RSS so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on Apple Podcasts. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. And if you'd like to get help building an omnipresent content marketing strategy with a podcast and you want help, you might want to book a podcast strategy session with us at pbp.fm. Just click the Book a Strategy Session button and book a time on our calendar. We look forward to speaking with you. And be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.